Welcome to our Watch app course from Edgionics. My name is Brett. We're going to now work on our iOS app, which we've kind of neglected up to this point, but now we're going to start adding in some interface for it. So if I open up our main Watch iOS app folder, we have our main storyboard here, and on it right now there's not much going on, as you can see here. So we're going to start adding parts to it, and it's going to be similar to what we've done with the Watch app. Basically, we're going to have one view, the main view, that we can set a default city. So if we want to watch that city, we'll set it as default. Then that information will carry over to the Watch app, which is going to monitor upcoming dates and opposing team information and can display that in the glances, which we'll get into later. We'll also have a listing of stadiums in the iOS app that we can scroll through and click and go to the detail view to see all the information for those. So we're going to use a picker for that part. So the main thing we're going to start off with is at the top of our iOS app, we're going to have a picker. Below there, we'll have where we can set the default city that we want. So we'll have a button that lets us, or the default stadium, we'll have a button that's going to allow us to set that. So I'm going to open up the utilities pane so we can get at our controls. So the first thing we'll do is a picker. Now I'll drag that up here. And below there we'll have a button, and I'll drag that down here. And let's make sure we are not getting in the way of our status bar with this picker being at the top like it is. So actually I probably should have just ran this in an iPhone 5 instead of a 6. It's going to be quite big, but that's okay. All right, so there's our picker. That's going to be a good position. Now we need to work on just getting things centered. So I am going to go into our constraints, and it's going to be all the way to the top. We're going to allow no margins, and I think that will work out fine. So I'll add those constraints, do some updating, and there we are. All right, so here's our button, and I am going to stretch it to the edges and just call this button set default, so it'll set the default stadium. And I'll add some constraints. So from the picker, I'm going to move this up a little right there. What I can do is control drag, and I'll have vertical spacing, and then I'll set it at 50 and set these margins to 0. I'll add this constraint and set the text to set default stadium. All right, so if we run this, and an iPhone 5 should see a difference in alignment and placement of all these controls. All right, so there we are, and that looks fine. And just to double check this, in a 4, make sure everything is aligning properly across devices. And I'm not using a stack view, by the way. Just have these two items. I would get into the stack view if I had more, but this is not complicated or anything, and what I'm doing here should work fine across devices with just constraints. So the 4 looks good. Now we can work on a transition. So what I want to do is add another scene. That's going to be the detail view, so I'll do a view controller and drag that in here and move this over. So now we have our other scene. So what we actually want is one more button, and that is going to be for moving over into this second scene. So originally I was thinking we could just scroll through the picker, choose a stadium, and when we stop on that stadium we can transition, but that's not going to work well because we might want to set the default, or we might want to transition over to the detail view. So given those two actions, we're going to add another button that'll go right there. And for this, we'll have view details, and I am going to drag it to the edges. It's going to be similar to what we had with our Stadium button. Now I'm going to add everything into a stack view. There we are. And I'm going to set constraints on the stack view. And right now everything's going to be 0. Add those. There we are. And we'll go ahead and take a look at this in the iPhone 4. Check out our alignments and make sure everything looks good. That is looking good. So let's try this in a 5. See what that looks like. And that looks good too. So I think we're okay there. And now we can work on transitioning. So this segue is going to go from this button to here. And what I want to do is a show. Actually, yeah, a show is going to work fine. Now we have that segue. Okay, so from here, let's just test this segue out. So if I click View Details, we're in our Details view, and we can go ahead and start adding controls to this detail view. So what we're going to want are a few labels. We're going to have the name, and these are going to go in a stack view. So I'm just going to do Stadium name is what that's going to be. We'll have play date. We'll have opposing team. And that's fine for now. Then I'll add these to a stack view like this and set the margins to 0. I'll just do this in even 40 from the top and go with these margins. It's not like in my 40. 0, 0. And this one down here at the bottom I'm not going to worry about. So I'll add those constraints, move this over, and go back. I'll just leave that at that 35, and then I'll update constraints. Let's see, I think everything is fine. And what I can do is add a little spacing on these things here. So if I click on my stack view, and let's see if I go down to the bottom, let's see, we should have one for spacing. Let me make sure I'm on my stack view. Whoops, we want this one, and actually it's going to be over here in the attributes inspector instead of the size inspector. And right here we have spacing, so I'm going to go ahead and put some spacing between these. About 20 will work. Let this update and try this out on an iPhone 5. Then we'll look at it on an iPhone 4. I just like to test them and make sure things look fine as I'm putting this together, because with stack views and constraints, if you go a little bit too far and you allow these errors to build up, problems to build up, it's harder to untangle it. So that's why I like to do it as I go. So that is looking pretty good. And if I switch over to an iPhone 4, should see a similar kind of layout. Centered, good spacing, pretty much at the top on this detail view. So that's looking fine. All right, so we have our layout now. We have transitions to our other screen. And next what we need to do is supply the data source that we're going to use for these stadiums. So in that case, we're going to make use of the array structure we've put together in the Watch app, but we're going to actually share it across so we can get our iPhone app up and running.